Welcome to the November 5th, 2018 meeting of the Stillwater City Council. I'm going to call this meeting to order. And I will ask for you all to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Short microphone today. Can everyone hear me if I talk back here from this microphone? Or do I have to lean in like this?
Yes.
Can I switch your microphones?
You can switch mine.
How's that? Any better? Excellent. All right. Well, again, welcome to the November 5th meeting. I noticed we've got some visitors here from the current Leadership Stillwater class, correct? Doing your civic duty and learning about how the city council meetings work. Great to have you. All right. Item 3, consent docket. Counselors, questions, comments, or items you'd like to remove from the consent docket?
Mayor, I'd like to remove item G, about the authorized Stillwater Public Library to apply for a $9,000 health literacy grant from Oklahoma State Department of Libraries.
Okay, we'll remove item G. Further comments, questions, or motions, council?
Motion to approve the consent docket minus item G.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket minus item G. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket minus item G is approved. That takes us to number 4, public comment on agenda items not scheduled for public hearing. I have one person signed up for this, Mr. Roger Goes, speaking to us about the resolution, item 2018-20, correct? Is that right?
About the stormwater funding, I believe.
Yes, it is.
Yes. I'd just like to encourage you to support that stormwater. I've been working with staff. There was a master plan done in 2000. Staff's working to try to find that. Hopefully that can be found and resurrected and maybe not cost as much to get done before this is dropped, but it was paid for and they're looking for it.
We can't find it.
If you don't mind, I'm going to slip another one in here real quick that's in SUA on the water pressure and just support reducing that. Sure. So I'll go home and watch you on TV. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Probably.
That takes us to item 5, items removed from the consent docket. Counselor Zanotti.
Yes, we have Melody Kellogg in the audience, Director of the Stillwater Public Library, and I don't want you to worry. I don't need to come up. I just wanted to congratulate the Public Library on the opportunity to have this grant. The prior 2 years, you have asked for funding from this health literacy grant and was awarded $4,000 for both those grants and did the Simple Steps for Better Health and a Story Walk in Couch Park, both which were very successful, and so successful that this time you're actually able to apply for a grant that's worth $9,000. And you guys have put in to do a mobile teaching kitchen unit that the Payne County Health Department, OSU Extension, the YMCA, and the Auditorium are going to partner with the public library in order to utilize this and teach. The goal is to show families how to make their food budget stretch further from offering their families healthier choices, demonstrations on seasonal fruits and vegetables. I think it's just another way to show the wonderful partnerships that happen in this community. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to Melody and the Public Library for applying for that grant and being so successful in the past that it was increased. So congratulations.
Excellent. That is great. Do you have a motion on the item?
I would like to go ahead and approve from the consent docket item G. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item G from the consent docket. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, that item is approved. Okay, item 6, general orders. A, report results of property owner polling regarding 12th Avenue overlay districts and seek direction to the development quarter plans and comprehensive plan. Mr. McNichol.
Paula Dennison, our Director of
of Development Services will provide that report.
Good evening. I have a short presentation. There's quite a few maps and a lot of numbers in the PowerPoint. It accompanies the report that is in your packet that was also out on the website. So starting off, based on the rezoning request about 2 years ago along 12th Avenue, that made its way into meetings, public input meetings with the neighborhood group regarding whether the comprehensive plan needed to be changed for that area. Out of that discussion, multiple discussions, came 2 overlay district proposals. One of the overlay districts included multi-use or mixed-use residential and some limited light commercial type activities. The other overlay district proposal was a conservation district overlay, and that was to conserve or preserve the single-family residential. And what's up on the screen is the proposed overlay boundaries. Green indicates the neighborhood mixed-use overlay proposal boundaries from 7th to 12th, along 12th from Blakely to Washington, and then north on Washington up to 7th. The orange indicates the neighborhood conservation overlay proposed boundaries. After these proposed overlays were notified to the property owners, then there was a number of turnout for the Planning Commission meeting. The vocalization was primarily, we don't want these overlays on our private property. So the decision, city manager went and spoke with some of the representatives of the neighborhood group, and the decision was for the city to actually go and poll each property owner within this entire area. They were allowed 30 days to return those postcards, postage-paid postcards, back to us, and we would take a record of those responses to the questions. Do you want in or out of an overlay district? If you want in an overlay district, is it the conservation or the residential that you want in, or is it the mixed use, which is the residential with the limited commercial that you want in? So this is to present the results of that poll. This is a map that indicates where all of the responses came from in the poll. Purple was the we want out of an overlay district. Green is the conservation overlay, and pink is the mixed use overlay. It's difficult to see, but this green outline that starts here on 7th and comes down to 12th and meanders along 12th, that is the boundary of the mixed use overlay proposal. The rest of it is the boundary of the conservation overlay proposal. There were 469 cards mailed. Of that, in the polling area, 195 were received back. There were some cards that were returned to us that were outside of the polling area, and I'll say something about that here in just a moment. So overall, of those 195 that came back, 121 indicated they wanted out of an overlay district. 48 indicated they preferred to be in under conservation. 26 in under mixed use. And you can see the percentages, that breakdown of all the cards mailed and the cards received back. So when this information was presented to the manager's office, additional questions were asked of the manager's office to further break it down specifically to the expanded mixed-use area and then the conservation area. So the in the mixed-use area, 47 and a half properties. The reason for that is, and if you'll bear with me just a moment, I'll go back. This parcel here on 12th Avenue, that is one parcel. Half of it is in mixed use, half of it is in conservation. So we got a card back, it was counted half in each of those districts. Again, they're within the mixed-use area, which is the smaller, down Washington and 12th. The majority of them indicated out, none indicated conservation, and 9 of the 26 indicated mixed use. Going to the conservation area, the majority of them indicated out that we received back, 47 conservation, 17 mixed use. Some of the cards that we received that were outside of the polling area were in the original proposal all the way from 12th up to 6th Avenue, which included the Donut, Sprouts, some of those in that block. They chose to go ahead and complete a card and send it back in to us. Actually, most of those were hand-delivered to us. So another question arose, not to complicate the matter any further, but another question arose based on the original study area and the area of notification for the original area. The original study area is shown here in the black outline, from 11th to the properties immediately south on 12th, halfway between Walnut and Pine, over to Washington. So it is a much reduced area from the expanded polling area. The notification area for this original proposal is the hashed outline. So of the properties in that area, 82 in the original area, 28 cards returned. Pretty even breakdown, 11, 8, and 9 for the desires within that original area. When we expanded it to that original area and the notification for that area, 303 properties, 138 cards returned, and the majority of that wanted out, 26 for conservation and 20 for mixed use. Those are the results of the property owner polling for 12th Avenue. The intent of this polling was to determine the true will of the owners of the property in that area, the mixed use and the conservation area. And from what we have received back in, we have determined that the majority of the property owners in that area do not want an overlay district applied to them. I'll be happy to answer any questions, try to answer any questions that you may have.
Would it be accurate to say the majority of the owners who returned cards,
Who returned cards, yes.
not the majority of the people in the area?
The majority that we heard from wanted out, yes. And if they did not return a card, we did not assign it one way or another.
Remind me of the process if to adopt an overlay anywhere. Is there a requirement that a certain number of percentage of the landowners in the overlay, in the proposed overlay district, approve it? Or is it independent of them?
There is no statutory requirement. Our city codes do not have a minimum percentage of owners within a certain area that is required for that to become effective. Therefore, we have chosen to go this route to, before anything is even considered on someone's property, get a feel from the owners within that area of their desires, those who feel inclined to respond back. But no, sir, there's no statutory requirement for a percentage.
Councilors, any other questions?
I think that it's, the original idea was to, I think, that I had, was that we would use this process in this neighborhood to be a template for working with neighborhoods. And it seemed that it did not go well. And I'm wondering if you could identify how we could do it better. We know that the engagement of citizens in their own neighborhoods and decisions is going to get us the best result. So how do we do that well? And perhaps you can't answer that at this very moment, but I would like an answer.
Go ahead.
If I may jump in here, one of the things I think is that we do this poll initially. When someone desires to have an overlay, to actually poll the residents of the prospective area at that point, and then meet with those citizens, and that city staff develop that area based on meeting with the citizens, not citizens meeting alone, because it becomes very difficult for staff to understand where they're headed when they're precluded from the meeting. So you're right, citizen input is imperative. I think one of the things that we learned here is that one, you need to clearly define the area and stick with that area. And there's no expansion, there's no contraction. Once you start the study, that needs to be the area, unless there's extraordinary circumstances. And two, certainly, we need better communication between those citizen groups and the city.
I think, I don't know, am I on? I think sometimes when we do public participation too, and I wasn't following this particular issue, so I'm not, I guess, speaking to this exact process, but it seems like in my experience working with communities, sometimes when we're doing public participation, when we're sharing information at the onset, it's important that that's an inclusive information share, as opposed to like, we know kind of what it is we want to do. We're just kind of telling you what it is. That's our public. There's different ways to engage them, and it certainly seems like doing the poll is really helpful. It's a very direct way of gathering information. But I think, most citizens probably don't understand what an overlay is or kind of how that would work for them. So finding ways to gather and be collaborative in that process and share the information that our staff professionals have, and how this could be helpful, or maybe what some of the challenges and opportunities are in those situations, is really important at the outset as well. Because probably if you polled most people at the outset, they wouldn't really know, I don't know if I want that or not. I'm not really sure exactly what that does for me and how that would work for me. And there's lots of different facets of public participation. And if we really want to engage the public, it's not being a talking head at the beginning of that. It's really kind of asking for participation in a true and meaningful way. And I'm not saying that hasn't happened here, but I think as we look forward in planning, that's, if we're really serious about community engagement and public participation, that's where we really need to be headed, is thinking hard about how we solicit information and share information in those really meaningful ways. And the follow-through, I think that comes with that too.
This didn't happen in a linear way at all. It came from one request for a map amendment, and then out of that, kind of from here, kind of from there. I mean, it wasn't linear at all. So it's hard to say, where we could have gone a different direction. But I would love to be able to, with your expertise in planning and doing these types of things with neighborhoods, to give us some suggestions of how to head off this kind of tangle that we ended up in.
Well, I can offer one suggestion initially.
Please do.
And that is to have a certain percentage requirement of property owners in an affected area actually petition the city council, planning commission, city manager for some sort of action regarding their properties. That would be one sure way to make sure that, the public was not only informed but desiring of some change.
That sounds like a great suggestion. do you know of other areas or cities that have a particular percentage?
We have not done the research on it. We can certainly do that. I do know that some states actually require certain percentages.
So theoretically, if a person decided that they'd like to have their neighborhood conservation district, before the city did anything, they would have to come with 60% of the owner's signatures.
Yes, whatever the percentage was as established, yes.
I think part of the other problem here is that, like you just said, it was somewhat reactionary to a single application that was contrary to the last long-term plan we did. It was changing what we had in our long-term planning from 2008, and our response was, well, let's not just do this piecemeal. Let's try to make it bigger. Well, I think part of the solution to this problem is being less reactionary and more ahead of issues like this in our updates to the comprehensive plan. When a major, 4-lane road is redone in town, we should get ahead of that and say, hey, how is this going to affect development along this road? And let's update our comprehensive plans. The comments in the memo here around the next update of our land development code or of our comprehensive plan and potentially of corridor plans in relation to that, I think is really where we need to get ahead of these things. We need to be more proactive around this planning instead of just waiting for someone to come in and say, hey, I want to do something, and then us have to figure out, well, how does this going to fit in the bigger picture, and try to draw that bigger picture on the fly while you have a specific project that's being proposed, and while that person is trying to get a project done. We talked about this at our joint meeting with the Planning Commission, right? Trying to do a more regular update of our land development or of our comprehensive plan, and some of these smaller corridor plans as well on a more regular basis, so that we're not in this situation again. And I think this process, and that's good data that was collected, I think that's an important part of doing this better. The comprehensive nature of that communication definitely needs to improve. This was a valuable process for us in figuring out how to do this better. It didn't go well. It was messy, but it definitely helps us figure out how to approach these problems more constructively in the future.
And keeps it consistent, so that it's not on a neighborhood by neighborhood, but that everyone feels like the process is done the same way.
Paula, do you
Absolutely.
think that if there had been the opportunity to do kind of a district or corridor plan in this area, like an actual district study or corridor study here, that there may have been a different result in terms of like the input and overall sentiment of the community and the process? Or
Hard to gauge right now, being so deep in the forest. But it's very possible, because the first 2 or 3 input meetings we held, there was a lot of information, education. What does this mean? How will your property be affected? So having that on the front end holistically for everything, because of changes that had occurred, potential changes that could occur in the future. And I think a big component is, how have we gotten to our comprehensive plan that we have now? And why did it come from something else to what we have now? That could have really made a difference in the outcome, yes.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Paula.
Okay, if I may, I can go right into the next component of this report.
Please.
The corridor and/or comprehensive plans. At the meeting of the Planning Commission and the City Council, that study session, we were asked to just get some timelines and some cost estimates for the completion of such. We reached out to a number of firms, got responses back from 4 of those. So just generally speaking, a corridor plan range anywhere from $25,000 to $120,000 for that to be completed, and anywhere from 4 months to 12 months or a year's time. Comprehensive plan, of course, that's going to be the overall plan for the entire community. The range of it is 175,000 to 400,000, and the timeline, 1 to 2 years, is what it would take to get either of those done. And this is from the responses that we had back.
And that's an update to an existing comprehensive plan?
Yes.
That's not from scratch?
No.
That's what I was going to ask. Wow.
Paula, will you talk a little bit about what we typically, so most communities don't update their comprehensive plan. It's not a yearly update. And then there's a difference between an update and a redo. Can you talk a little bit about what's the kind of typical life cycle of a comprehensive plan?
Certainly. Unfortunately, the typical life cycle of a comprehensive plan is almost the 20 or 30 years it's written for. And that's very unfortunate. Oklahoma does not have a statutory requirement that it be updated nor even evaluated within a certain period of time of its adoption. The city has set a practice of at least taking a high-level look at the comprehensive plan to see if the entire plan needs to be totally reevaluated or completely updated. And we try and do that every 5 years. We don't always hit on it because a lot of things can change in Stillwater, Oklahoma, over the course of 5 years. Evaluation of a comprehensive plan pretty much takes the known things that have changed, the number of developments, where they have occurred, the densities, the extension of utilities, or where the athletic village expansion had occurred. Those knowns over a short period of time, they're much easier to address in an evaluation. Certain sections of the comp plan will be affected, typically not all elements or components of the comp plan. A lot easier to do, much easier to do locally than hiring someone from outside to do because all of the familiarity with what has occurred over that period of time. A complete redo of the comp plan, sometimes that's just needed because of the drastic changes, policy changes even more affects a complete update of a comprehensive plan. And that's where everything, there's some things that will be salvageable from the current one, for instance, but the majority of it is just start wholly from scratch.
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Will.
no, go ahead. You're following up.
So the last time, I think you have in our report, the last time the comprehensive plan was updated was 2008. Is that correct?
The comp plan,
I just kind of wanted to see where we're at. So the last time we were updated and then when it was actually written, kind of where we're at in our comp plan process.
the current comp plan was finished, if I can recall correctly, 2012-13, around that time.
For an update or redone?
It was completely redone based on the new land development code. So new zoning subdivision regulations completely changed how the future land development of Stillwater was going to be visioned. So the comp plan came along right after the land development code update. A unique thing about this comp plan process when we did it was we started the comprehensive plan update on the heels of the land development code adoption. In the midst of the comp plan update, we looked at a corridor redevelopment plan, out of which came form-based code. Then we came back to the comprehensive plan and finished it up. So there was an interim in between the total update where we did take a look at that more drilled down, detailed area specific for a master plan in essence, and then the zoning that came out of it. So that timeline is a little unusual. Usually it's start to finish, no interruptions, and you just go until it's done.
Do you think where do you think we're at in terms of from development or planning perspective? Do you think we're at a spot where we need to be looking at updating the plan again? Or do you think we're at a spot in terms of policy that we need to kind of look at a new way to develop a comprehensive plan?
I believe right now an update is more proper than a throw it out and start from scratch. Staff has finished the staff version update of our land development code, which is our chapter 23. And we are going to be beginning the process to put it out for public review and comment. I'm a little torn in which comes first, the code update or the vision update. They both work hand in hand. The comp plan is where do we want to be when we grow up, in essence, in 20, 25, 30 years out. The code is the day-to-day, how are we going to achieve that vision and get there? A reason I'm a little torn is there are so many technical changes that have occurred in the development world. 5 years ago, we were not discussing cottage homes, accessory dwelling units, or tiny homes. We are now. We have folks waiting in line for these code updates to be able to utilize the new code changes that would allow these type of expanded dwelling opportunities. So do we continue to put them on hold waiting for the comp plan? That's my challenge right now at the moment. My preference, where we are, finish the land development code update and then address the comprehensive plan update. As y'all know, we come back with land development code changes fairly regularly when they're needed. Comp plan, not so often.
Well, it may end up working that way better anyway with just budgetary restraints, right? I mean, fiscal year 19, there is no allocation for this in the 19 budget.
Correct.
Right, so to me, that tends to make sense just from a monetary standpoint.
Would you be finished with the code by the end of June 2019?
This fiscal year, we are hoping that we are. Yes, ma'am.
So, I mean, we wouldn't begin the comprehensive plan before July 2019 anyway.
We could if it was determined to do it in-house, but to contract with a consultant, that would be a new fiscal year.
But we don't have the staff to do both at the same time.
Not the land development code and comp plan, no ma'am. We did one at a time.
Paula, when was the last time you had outside support for the update to the comprehensive plan?
Before I got here.
Okay.
And I came in 2004.
So the 2013 update wasn't done with outside support?
No, it was all done in-house with our Citizen Master Plans Committee.
How long did that take?
Here again, unusual timeline because we had the corridor redevelopment plan and form-based codes in the middle of it, so we're looking at 2 years for all of it, all of those 3 items. Land development code right now is running 11, 12 months because that is not the only thing that your staff does. Any other questions on that? I'll be happy to answer. This is mainly for information purposes based on the conversation with the Planning Commission.
I'm just curious, I do appreciate your proposal that the whole thing needs to be updated. Is there any, would there be any benefit at all to identifying 4 corridors that need to be updated?
I believe there is. The comprehensive plan before this current one had individual neighborhood plans, is what they were referred to in that comprehensive plan. And there was so much additional detail for those neighborhood specific, and not just residential neighborhoods. One of them was the downtown area, was one of the individual neighborhood plans. And the information from it, the Puma group, when they came in to take a look at the downtown and around Campus Corner, they utilized a lot of that information, because the data had been gathered for them and great ideas in those neighborhood plans. I've already had a chat with staff about we need to include some level of neighborhood planning in the next comprehensive plan update.
I mean, if it is something that is going to be done in-house with the limited staff and time that we have beginning in July, maybe it would be more doable to concentrate on different corridors or neighborhoods.
Instead of the total overall update.
We could even begin before July, with our new outreach Speak Up or other ways of reaching citizens, what corridors, what neighborhoods would you like for us to look at?
Yeah.
Educating the public about comprehensive plans or corridor plans or what the whole process is or why we do it or how it impacts them. I think it would be really helpful to have that 6 or 7 months to begin that educational process.
I agree.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paula.
Yes, you're welcome.
Anything else on this item, counselors?
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
One item related to the 12th Street thing. You did adopt the substantive provisions for the overlay, but did not actually place the overlay. You did not create a map. We need to do something with that ordinance. You want me to bring back a repealer at the next meeting so that we can start that process? Because otherwise, you basically just have an ordinance that's on the books and it has no purpose.
I have no objection to that.
I'll prepare something. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Paula. That takes us to item 6B, which we have a memorandum that item has been withdrawn by the developer. So we will pull that from the agenda this evening. And we will move to item 6C, discussion on requirements for retail/non-residential in form-based code development, CC 18-122. I bet Paula's going to talk to us about this again.
I'll bet she is.
Yes, sir, I am. A little brief overview. So all of this comprehensive plan taught corridor redevelopment plan and form-based code. When form-based code was originally discussed here in Stillwater, one idea was to have a retail component as a requirement in any of the developments. There was no criteria set for where that threshold was, number of stories, what the development was, occupancy, anything like that. So nothing was ever actually put into the form-based code requirements themselves. Staff was asked to just take a look at options for requiring retail. We have actually expanded it to not just retail, but non-residential, because we do feel there's value in live-work arrangements. There's value in having service available within the structure that you live and even possibly shop. So that mixture, not necessarily retail only within. However, there were a number of questions that we started asking each other when we were going through this. The primary one, what should be driving retail? Should it be the market or should it be law requirements by code? Another, what would retail include? Therefore, we expanded it to non-residential as opposed to retail. Benefits of non-residential, you've got many more opportunities, primarily to get something in there and for it to be sustainable over a longer period of time. The retail market fluctuates so greatly. We ask what happens if the space remains vacant for extended periods of time. Unfortunately, we have examples of that throughout Stillwater, where vacant property has continued to deteriorate and decline may be used for purposes of which it is not intended. So you throw the code enforcement aspect into the vacant properties. And then if there is any time where a structure is built, the conversion of part of that structure to a different use. You're talking different requirements outside as well as inside. I just mentioned briefly parking in your report. There's also what code, building code, that structure has to comply under, whether it's retail, residential 1 or 2 family, or everything else. Those are different codes that you're looking at. So, to just provide for discussion purposes only, Lance Gross with Development Services drew up this proposal of initially different options for how any requirement, if the council chooses to go that manner, how any requirement could be written so as to apply to the developments. Option 1, everything on the ground floor would have to be non-residential. Option 2, you have a certain percentage, in this case 50% of the ground floor as non-residential. Option 3, you've got about 25% of each floor as non-residential. There you're getting more into the services, live, work opportunities. Option 4 would be wherever in the building that it made sense to put it, have a certain percentage. In this case, he drew it out about 25%. So these are just numbers thrown out there just to begin the discussion with council.
So Paula, with option number 4, when you talk, because you're right, no 2 buildings are going to be exactly alike, and so trying to make it a cookie cutter where it's the same thing for everyone isn't necessarily going to be the best option.
Correct, it's not. You may have some structures that mega-story high-rise in Stillwater. Anything over 2 or 3 stories is a high-rise here. So you'll have some of those that have a true need for a non-residential because of how they are constructed and the purpose for the uses of that building. Others, like we're seeing going up now, it's primarily housing. One of the 2 that are being built currently on the south side of campus, only one of those has any retail space in it, and it is yet to be leased.
I think that as I was involved in the form-based code, the actual purpose for creating the form-based code was to create a corridor that was attractive, that was interesting, that invited people to walk, bike, sit on a bench, enjoy. And so it's not necessarily that it has to all be residential or even non-residential on the first floor, but it can't be a brick wall. So I even wonder if we should just say this percentage of the first floor of buildings of this height. I mean, not every 2-story building needs to have the same thing, but and to just perhaps it does, but percentage of glass front.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So maybe if your apartment complex, your gym is there with windows instead of your fitness center being there, as opposed to, so a lot, obviously, in our big cities, this is a really big deal when you see, when you're looking to create mixed-use development and kind of that energy on the street. Even Oklahoma City had issues when they had the tunnel system, and for a long time, a lot of the businesses were underground in the tunnel system, and there was no life on the street because everything was underground. But they've kind of flipped that, and they're really looking for that activity, kind of human-scaled activity on our sidewalks. And I'm guessing that's kind of, when the form-based code discussion was starting, that's kind of what we were hoping for. But I think you're right, the market, a lot of times we see, they've got pictures in those ground floor windows with no businesses just yet. But I also agree that a brick wall is probably not the solution either, or what we want to see.
No.
Interfacing with our pedestrians and community at the street level or sidewalk level. So maybe there is a happy compromise
I
there.
think there could be could be compromises. I mean, we want it to be safe. I was thinking, well, you could do, cut out with grass, more grass between the building and the street, benches or art or something that makes it more creative, more interesting. I mean, I don't want to walk between two brick walls or two parking lots. I mean, I'd actually rather look at a parking lot than a brick wall. At least you can look at the cars. But I do think that we can absolutely be much more creative about this and much more specific in what we want. Not this would be nice or this is a recommendation. This is how we want our area to look.
I think there are a few other instances where this has come up in the form-based code where we have fairly open-ended design standards, but they're not specific enough to make sure they match on both sides of the street, or that they're, like you're saying, this design element. I think we should take a look at those design standards and try to figure out a way to make sure that they accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. That's a somewhat separate issue from requiring non-residential uses in a building. I think the tax increment finance district that allows for incentives but doesn't allow for incentives in primarily residential buildings actually helps solve part of that problem, because if a developer who wants to build an apartment building wants some sort of development assistance incentive, they're going to have to include something non-residential in their building. So that gives us a carrot for those developers to help get them to be more mixed use in what they're building. But along, separate lines around design, I think we do need to work on whatever a design standards update we can do to the form-based code area to make sure that we're giving those developers clear guidelines around what we want to see from a street level perspective.
Absolutely. Can we do that?
Yes, ma'am. We can.
You guys have a lot of time for that.
I will not have anything for the next meeting. But yes, we will start taking a much harder look at the design standards, especially for consistency and for that invite you in to the built space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can do that.
It could take some time, but Paula and her group are also working on a complete rewrite of standards and construction standards, construction ordinances, terms and conditions. There are other people helping with that, but it's a pretty significant task, so.
I know, everything needs to be done yesterday.
Right.
And it just is what it is. Lucky you're nice and calm. Right?
Yeah. We will be happy to update and bring it back to the council. Anything else on this for me?
Thank you, Paula.
Thanks, Paula.
Okay, thank y'all.
All right, item 7, resolutions. Resolution CC-2018-20, a resolution appropriating $6 million from the general fund and $120,000 from the stormwater fee fund for uses provided below. This is the cleaned up resolution from our meeting 2 meetings ago, where there were some discrepancies that we got straightened out. So this is addressing the discussion we had about using these funds that we've pulled from some of our accounts to spend this fiscal year on transportation projects.
Yes, sir.
Councilors, anyone have questions about this ordinance specifically? Or motions?
Motion to adopt resolution CC-2018-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2018-20. Please vote. The vote of 5-0, that resolution is adopted. Okay, that takes us to 7B, resolution CC-2018-22, a resolution establishing a temporary moratorium suspending the enforcement and prosecution of municipal ordinances prohibiting the keeping of chickens at residential locations within the corporate limits of the city of Stillwater. Who wants to talk about this one first?
This is in response to the ongoing discussion within the community about the current ordinances that regulate the keeping of fowl which includes chickens, within so many feet of a residential structure inside the city limits. As a result of that discussion, we realized that there are a lot of moving parts here because these animal code sections also interact with pieces of the zoning code and health codes and things of that nature. If you do want to study this issue, then what our proposal is that you adopt a short-term moratorium that would allow us to abstain from prosecuting the possession of chickens within the city limits, merely the possession. The moratorium is very narrow in scope, and it does not preclude the enforcement of at-large ordinances. For example, if the chickens get out and they're where they're not supposed to be and they are captured, then we treat them as any other animal at large, or any kind of health code or nuisance type violations. This would just, I hate to say it, but we're decriminalizing the keeping of chickens.
Well, we're not decriminalizing it. We're saying we temporarily are not going to write you a ticket for it.
Well, yes. And
It remains criminal.
It's still criminal. We're cutting them some slack in the enforcement, but this is just simply for the possession because our neighbors to the south who have engaged in this conversation, particularly Edmond, there were a lot of people who had a lot of opinions on this, and it took them quite a while to work through their process, and I know of a couple of other cities that also, it just takes a while. So we're recommending that the moratorium, should you choose to adopt it, remain in effect for a period of about 6 months to allow us to fully vet this, and then we would come back with a proposal that hopefully will address the issue.
Counselors, questions? Sorry.
If the chickens get loose, will they be impounded with the other birds?
Yes.
They'd be in a different aviary, though.
Any other non-scooter related chicken questions? So just to be clear, this issue's come up, and we have a chicken ordinance currently, correct?
We have an ordinance, the main ordinance basically says you can't keep fowl, and it's not limited to chickens. It's also ducks, turkeys, peacocks, guineas, the whole gamut, geese, all of those you can't have those within 150 feet of a residential structure, unless you're in property that is zoned for agricultural purposes. And in that scenario, the distance is 50 feet. But that's the primary one, and that's the one that usually when there are citations issued, that's the one that is used.
Okay. And we've had questions about whether we could alter the parameters of what it takes to keep chickens within residential areas, correct?
Yes, and I know that there's a trend nationwide for keeping 2 or 3 hens in your backyard for purposes of fresh eggs and things like that. And chicken keeping is a lot different than it was at the time that the ordinance was originally written. If you go to any of the farm stores, you'll notice rather elaborate chicken coops and stuff that are fairly self-contained. But in the end, they are still chickens, and you have to, if you're going to keep them, you have to be vigilant.
Mm-hmm. So the idea here is to just pause not writing tickets for people who have mere possession of chickens contrary to the existing ordinances for a period of time until we can figure out what we want to do.
Yes, sir.
But what we may want to do is to keep the ordinance we have, right? We're not saying we're going to change the ordinance, we're saying we're going to look at the issue.
Look at it.
Right. There's no supposition here as to the outcome. It's just simply to give us ample time to study this issue.
Okay. Counselors, any questions or comments? Well,
Mayor, any questions?
I would just ask people in general, and this goes for both chickens and birds, this kind of, to me, mirrors the scooter situation in some respect, right? There are laws on the books here about what you can do and what you can't do. And the solution to that is not to just break the law and then come back and say, hey, will you change the law for me? We would appreciate, it would be easier in these situations if you have a something that you'd like to see changed from an ordinance perspective in a municipality, that you approach that ahead of time and say, hey, can we talk about this? Rather than saying, we've all now, done this thing that we're not supposed to be doing, and now we're forcing your hand on the issue to try to get it changed. I mean, it is not the most efficient way to do this. This goes back to our discussion on 12th Street. When we're reacting to a single issue, it becomes very inefficient for your government to have to figure out how to do these things, rather than approaching it from a planning perspective and getting ahead of it, and not just coming in and saying, why are you taking away my chickens, even though they were illegal when you got them? So it's frustrating at some level. I understand it's frustrating for people who feel like this was a reasonable thing for them to have, but for us to do this stuff efficiently, it's a lot easier if we get ahead of it and we are not reactionary, but we're proactive about it. So I'm okay with this idea. We need to take some time to make sure we do it right, and to give people some space while we do that. That's fine. So anyway, I don't know if anybody else has any comments about that, but that's how I feel about it. Comments or questions or motions on the resolution?
Motion to adopt resolution number CC-2018-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt resolution CC-2018-22. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the resolution is adopted. Thank you, councilors. Item 8A, ordinances on first reading. Ordinance number 3421, an ordinance closing portions of a public right-of-way located within the city of Stillwater adjacent to properties addressed as 1940 West 26th Avenue, 2223 South Willis Street, 1799 West 19th Avenue, and 2199 West 19th Avenue, as more particularly described herein. Mr. Dorman, this one's from...
About mid-October.
Yeah. Questions or comments or motions?
Motion to advance ordinance 3421 to second reading?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to advance 3421 to second reading. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, that ordinance is advanced to second reading. Item B, ordinance number 3422, an ordinance rezoning a tract of land located at 1940 West 26th Avenue, as more particularly described in this ordinance, from RT Residential 1 and 2 Family to RSS Residential Small Lot Single Family classification. Councilors?
Motion to adopt ordinance number 3422 to second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to advance 3422 to second reading. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the ordinance is advanced. Item C, ordinance 3423, an ordinance closing portions of a public right-of-way located within the city of Stillwater along West 7th between Maple Avenue and 4th Avenue, as more particularly described herein. Councilors?
Motion to move ordinance 3423 to second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to advance 3423. Please vote. Ordinance 3423 is advanced to second reading with a vote of 5-0. Item D, ordinance number 3424, an ordinance amending ordinance number 3407, approving and adopting a minor amendment to the Stillwater Reinvestment Plan, a Stillwater Downtown Campus Link Project Plan, providing for an allocation of generated increment to Payne County, its health department, and Meridian Technology as a specific revenue source to these public entities as permitted by law, providing for the allocation of apportioned tax increments, clarifying the project area and increment district boundaries, providing for severability, and declaring an emergency. This one is, and I'll jump in here unless you have...
No, go right ahead.
So this is an ordinance that presents a minor amendment to the campus reinvestment, or the Stillwater Reinvestment Plan, the TIF area, to address some of the concerns that were raised by Payne County specifically and Meridian Technology Center around the apportionment of the tax increment district, or the tax increments collected. Generally what we're doing here is saying that for those entities, so nothing for Stillwater Public Schools would change. Stillwater Public Schools would be treated the same way they were under the original ordinance. This would allow for properties that have not been invested in with public funds, so existing developments, including the apartments that are under construction now within the TIF area. If they've not received public funds, their increment would continue to go directly to the entities, the county and Meridian Technology Center, as they would without a TIF. If a property has public investment made in it, that becomes now an increment that is collected by the TIF. So they're treated separately, they're treated differently for the schools and for the county because of that specific issue. But overall, the amount of money collected, the TIF's projections all basically remain the same, given the interest we've had in large projects already within the TIF area. We expect, I mean, part of the reason it was set up the way it was that there were no particularly large projects that we anticipated seeing right away, and that original setup gave the TIF more money initially to do small projects. With larger projects being proposed or in process here, it gives us a lot more flexibility with how this money's spent. So this addresses concerns. I've had conversations with folks from the county, from Meridian, about addressing their concerns that were specifically stated around the original TIF ordinances, and this helps alleviate those. And so I think it's a good change. It doesn't affect our ability to do what we want to do with the TIF, but it does also bring together all of the affected taxing entities into a unified stance moving forward. So I think it's a good compromise. I think it's a good way forward, and I think we'll be able to do what we want to do, and we'll have everybody on board doing it. Questions or comments about the ordinance?
So this does not increase the amount of time that we predict, that the TIF is going to be enacted. It doesn't decrease the amount of development or return from the TIF that we expect to get. Basically what this does is this absolves any property that did not receive public funds from the TIF, basically. Is that right?
For the county and Meridian and
For the
county.
county, right. Okay.
For the schools, it's treated exactly the same way as it was originally.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So it provides a different, basically the math is different for those entities.
Yeah. It
But
helps.
yes, it does. It gives them more, I think, comfort around the TIF collecting funds that the TIF is invested in the enticement of.
Yeah.
But timeline-wise, money-wise, all that stuff stays the same. So
Yeah.
it's really an internal math change, which is why it's considered a minor amendment. It's not something that requires a new process or anything. We can change it by ordinance.
And I think you said this, but that does include the two developments that are ongoing right now,
Yes.
the apartment buildings. So
It will include any property in the TIF that's redeveloped. So if there's a lot that changes into something else and there's no public money invested in that development, it will be considered I can't remember what the term is, an indirect increment. And so the new tax money generated from that development will go to Meridian and the county rather than going into the TIF.
Right.
Their portion of it goes to
Right.
them, whatever they would have normally got.
Sure.
If there is public investment made in any property that's redeveloped within the area, all of that new increment goes into the TIF. Yes.
I understand the reason for this, probably my highest value is that we work together, all the entities. I have a little bit of hesitation. I was quite okay with the way we had originally set up the TIF, and I defended it loudly and I think clearly for 6 months or a year. And so I still think that it was an appropriate way to do business, but it is a higher value to do this as an entire community. So I hope it does achieve that.
I entirely agree with that. I think you're completely right, that the original way this was set up was a good plan for the circumstances as they existed at the time. This change doesn't affect that. It does give us the ability to move forward together, to get everybody on the same page, and that has a huge value in the success of Stillwater's redevelopment efforts over the next 15, 20, 25 years.
Well, and I think it may go without saying, but we wouldn't be able to do this if it weren't for the interest that's already been generated in the TIF, right? So in that respect, it's kind of a testament to the TIF is kind of doing what we wanted to do, right? Otherwise, if it wasn't, we wouldn't be able to do this.
Exactly. Yep. All right, further questions, comments, or motions?
So I'll make a motion to advance ordinance 3424 to second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to advance 3424 to second reading. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the ordinance is moved to second reading. All right, 8. Whatever number this is next. On second reading, ordinance number 3419, an ordinance amending and repealing portions of Chapter 3, Stillwater City Code titled Alcoholic Beverages by amending Article 1 in general, Section 3 through 5, hours of operation, providing for severability, and declaring an emergency. I'm going to go back and can I do the emergency clause on the last one in a second?
Yeah, because that's only first reading.
Oh, yeah. Good point. No, never mind. Okay. So on second reading, 3419, this is our changes to the alcohol laws in response to all the state stuff.
This is the leftover provisions on hours of operation that came in at the end of the legislative session.
Motion to adopt ordinance number 3419.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance 3419. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the ordinance is adopted. Is there a motion on the emergency clause?
Motion to adopt an emergency clause for ordinance 3419.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the emergency clause for ordinance 3419. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the emergency clause is adopted. All right, item 9, reports from officers and boards. Mr. McNichol.
Yes, sir. Help us congratulate Stillwater Fire Department's Battalion Chief Terry Essery on receiving recognition as a Chief Fire Officer from the Commission on Professional Credentialing through the Center for Public Safety Excellence. Terry becomes one of only 1,298 fire chief officers worldwide. That's pretty significant. Very significant. Thank you for your services, and congratulations, Terry, on a job well done.
Excellent.
And
Thank you. Mr. Dorman.
Nothing to report, sir.
Thank you. Counselor Zanotti.
I do. We're going to welcome a new city employee, Tim Best. Tim is a new operations technician, and he completed his new employee orientation last week. So welcome aboard, Tim.
Excellent. Welcome to the city.
Yep.
Go for it. Vice Mayor.
Okay. First of all, because this is most imminent, don't forget to vote tomorrow. If you haven't already voted, please get to the ballot box. And then it may be early November voting time, but it's also time to plan for Breakfast with Santa on Saturday, December 8th at the Community Center. It will be here before you know it. Tickets are $3 per child and the tickets include breakfast and an opportunity to visit and take photos with Santa. You may purchase tickets online at tickets.stillwater.org or at the door the day of the event. So vote tomorrow. Get your tickets for Breakfast with Santa on December 8th. Is there an age limit on that?
I don't know. Do you want to get a ticket?
No.
I bet they'd sell you one.
Only if I get my wish.
Councilor Wedlake.
Thank you, sir. Here's a new feature we'll be sharing each meeting, city statistics. For example, did you know the city mowed more than 18,000 acres of grass from July 1st, 2017 through June 30th of this year? I didn't know that, so you're welcome for that, everybody. Staff follows a predetermined mowing rotation to keep all of the city's property under control. With all of the rain this year, it was more of a challenge than usual. So look forward to your city statistics each meeting. I will say, in addition to this, if I may, tonight you have about 20 minutes to get over to Iron Monk Brewery to hear a guitar legend in Edgar Cruz, who is an Oklahoma-born guy who is a classically trained finger-stylist guitarist. And if you haven't heard him,
He's amazing.
he's
He is phenomenal.
unbelievable. I can't even believe he's playing in Stillwater tonight. We better make the executive session fast so we can get over there. So, Edgar Cruz tonight at Iron Monk Brewery. it's worth it.
Thank you. Councilor Jaloski.
The city's October sales tax report is in. This sounds so much less exciting than. The city collected over $2,800,000 in sales tax, which is an increase from October 2017 by 3.69%, and exceeded October 2018 projections by 4.37%. You can read the full sales tax report online at stillwater.org.
Good news.
It is good exciting.
I have a note here that we're doing a ribbon cutting ceremony on Wednesday, November 14th at the Wings of Hope Family Crisis Services at 3800 North Washington Avenue. This is a ribbon cutting for the new sidewalk, the bus stop, the little bridge that goes over the sidewalk bridge that's over there. All that was all done with the Community Development Block Grant money this year. It assists folks who need to get transportation to and from Wings of Hope. It also connects over to the lake. It's a great sidewalk, and we'll be doing a ribbon cutting for that on November 14th at noon. Okay, that takes us to item 11, appointments. We have some planning commission seats open and a number of folks that applied to be appointed to the planning commission, which is fantastic. We appreciate everyone who was willing to put their name in that hat. There are 3 seats available. I wanted to ask this question before I go further. The term expiration on all of these says 7 of 18, and then the next term expiration is 7 of 20. Are these all going to be appointed the same term, these 3 seats, or are they staggered? Do we know?
I'm not sure why the 720 seats would be.
They're 3-year terms, so if they expired in 18, these will expire, their new terms will expire in 21.
So there are 3 seats that all expire in 21 and 2 seats that expire in 20? Okay. That seems like we need to figure out a better way to stagger that.
I'm not following that one. They should all, if they're 3-year terms, they're 3-year terms.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why we have 3 seats that expire 1 year and then
Oh, and
2 seats that expire.
Oh, well, we do them staggered, and when we set the boards up, usually there'll be 2 seats 1 year, 2 seats the next year, and 1 seat the following year.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That isn't, I think Ariel Ross's seat is not expiring the same year as the other 2.
I can go check.
We'll double check.
Because of a resignation.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying I don't think her term expired this year in the 18. I think it expired next year in 19. But we'll double check that. In any event, we had 2 seats that expired. Brad Brickelman, who had served 1 term, and Dusty Lane, who has served 4 terms on the Planning Commission. I would like to, I'm going to do all of these, but I'd like to nominate Mr. Rickelman to serve another term on the Planning Commission. I think there is real value in continuity in these seats, and having folks who understand the process, getting to get up to speed and serve more than just a couple years at a time. So we actually have folks who know what they're doing. It's a complicated board to serve on, lots of stuff to get to know. So I would like to nominate Mr. Rickelman for another term. For Mr. Lane's seat, he has served 4 terms. We certainly appreciate the service that he has given the Planning Commission over the years, but I do think it would be wise of the 12 folks that applied for this seat that we bring someone new in to sit in that seat. So I would like to nominate Vicki Jerome to serve in that chair on the Planning Commission. And then for Ariel Ross's seat, I would like to nominate Mike Shanahan, who previously served on the Planning Commission years ago, has been active in many ways around town, and would be a good addition for that seat. So those 3 members, Mr. Rickelman, Mr. Shanahan, and Ms. Jerome, for the 3 open seats on the Planning Commission.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for those nominations. Please vote.
I also would like to thank Dusty and Ariel for their
Yes.
service, and 12 years on the Planning Commission is quite a gift to the community.
Absolutely. With a vote of 5-0, those were approved. Yes, very much so. Mr. Lane and Ms. Ross for their service on the Planning Commission. It's as we know, and you guys probably understand, it's not an easy job. It's somewhat thankless a lot of times, and it requires you to do a lot of homework on a lot of things that you really don't understand when you first walk into those seats. So we appreciate all the work they've done there. All right, that takes us to item 12. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Is there a motion and a second to adjourn? Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the Stillwater City Council meeting is adjourned. I will now call the Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting for November 5th, 2018 to order. Councilors, are there questions or comments on the consent docket? Or motions, for that matter?
Motion to approve the consent docket?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Please vote. We're a little ahead of it. There we go. Consent docket is approved with a vote of 5-0. I keep calling you councilors and your trustees at this meeting, and I should know better. All right, item 5, resolutions. Resolution SUA 2018-9, a resolution amending the City of Stillwater standards adopted March 20th of 2017, Section 1400, Part 3, Rural Water System, Subsection 3, Water Mains.
Mayor, if we could, we'd like to continue that item to the next agenda. Some questions have popped up this evening, and we want to make sure that we've touched all the bases before we bring this thing forward.
Do we need a motion to continue it?
No, sir, it's not a noticed item.
Okay. All right, we will continue that item to the next meeting, which takes us down to adjourning this one.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the meeting is adjourned. I will now call to order the November 5th, 2018 meeting of the Stillwater Economic Development Authority and ask the trustees for questions, comments, or motions on the consent docket.
Motion to approve the consent docket?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Please vote. That's me. With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. Reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman.
Request executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307B4 involving confidential communication between the trustees and general counsel concerning a pending investigation involving Visit Stillwater OK, Inc. It's my opinion that public disclosure of this matter will seriously impair the ability of SEDA to conduct a pending investigation, litigational proceeding in the public interest. Secondly, request an executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307C10 for the purpose of conferring on matters pertaining to economic development, including the transfer of property, financing, or the creation of a proposal to entice a business to locate within the city of Stillwater. This public disclosure of the matter to be discussed would interfere with the development of products or services and violate the confidentiality of the business.
Thank you, Mr. Dorman. Mr. McNichol. Do you have anything?
No items, sir.
Good. Trustees, sorry to.
It's all right.
Anything from the trustees?
Motion to enter executive session?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to enter executive session. Please vote.
Sorry, it's Edgar Cruz, guys.
Yeah.
12 minutes.
With a vote of 5-0, we'll now enter executive session. Thank you all.